Hello, everybody. My name is Ricardo Cabrera, and I am the current operations manager for the Latino Chamber of Commerce of Boulder County. And today we have Guillermo Estrada as a guest. He's the program manager for the resiliency program, the SUMA project in Boulder County. Guillermo, welcome. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for the invitation. I am happy to have the opportunity to share about the Cultural Brokers Program and the Boulder County SUMA project as well in the context of business community. Thank you.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah, so we are going to talk today about the concept of cultural differences, cultural brokers as it pertains to business. And I want to start, Guillermo, by telling me and sharing this awesome example that you have for your personal experience of a cultural difference, this gap that exists and that we're all trying to close, right? So go ahead.
You mean the serial experience we were talking about?
Yeah, the serial experience.
So this is a very quick, lighthearted example of cultural differences. When we first moved in together, my roommate and I had a little bit of a tension about cereal. I come from Puerto Rico, and we always put the cereal in because it spoils and everything goes in the fridge because of the humidity. And he kept it out. And one day I asked him, like, why are you doing that? And we had the conversations like, this is why I do it, and this all these things. It's kind of like I just do it that way. And then we the conclude that it's not needed to be it's not because of Colorado is dry. It's not going to spoil as easy. A lighthearted example of those cultural differences and that call for really to have a conversation between both parties and really come to the table to explore the differences and come to new conclusions, and that obviously can get applied to racial disparities, systemic issues, and all these other things. When we put more resources and things to hold the space for those conversations to happen. Obviously, it's way different having a conversation about cereal than other issues that are more serious in our community.
Yeah, no, but it's a great microcosm example of what a cultural difference is. I mean, I'm from Mexico, and we put our cereal in the cupboard, not in the refrigerator. So even for me, when you told the story, it was like, wow, there's another great example of a cultural difference. And the moral of my story, of your story for me, is that not only did you you had a conversation to understand the why, but you changed your paradigm. You changed the way you do things. So now, you put the cereal somewhere else. It doesn't go, I'm assuming it doesn't go in the refrigerator anymore because you understand that the need is different, right? Or he understands that the need is different, and you guys have created a change in your household and moved on. So I'm sure like that there are other examples, and one of the great, a great quote I've heard out there from a colleague of mine is that assumptions create barriers, and that's a great example. Assumptions about personal backgrounds, about education, generational differences. We all know that it is hard to talk to a millennial because they're speaking a different language almost, right? Assumptions about body language. There are certain physical attitudes, positions, and signs that are offensive to some cultures that are not in other cultures. Language styles, high context languages versus low context languages. Or, my favorite example is that if you ask a Japanese speaking individual where the salt is, he's going to say it's in the kitchen, right? If you ask another culture that is not so abstract, for example, where the salt is, they're going to say it's in the kitchen cupboard. If you ask a Mexican where it is, I'm going to say is on top of the stove, on the cupboard to the right, 3 rows behind, 2 to the left, right next to the pepper. Um, and that also translates into cultural differences. So the question now is, what that is kind of like the point of the conversation today. So tell me about, recognizing this. What's your experience, and how would you say that, maybe an important point is to recognize, first of all, that there are this, this gap exists.
Definitely. So I think the first call of action is recognizing those cultural differences, really recognizing that our way of doing things is not necessarily the way of doing things for everybody in our institutions, in our communities as well. So when we talk about what's going on in that cultural difference, there needs to be a recognition of like they're doing things in a different way. It's not necessarily right or wrong, it's just different. So that opens up the conversation of it, trying to understand how is this happening? How is this happening in our communities? And how can we bridge that how can we bridge that gap with the communication between the communities and the institutions? Because ultimately we want to serve that community. So we need to know how they are perceiving life itself and the things that we're trying to offer to them.
Yeah. So to land this a little bit, I mean, this gaps exist between like the decision maker to the manager, and maybe from the manager to the employee, and vice versa as well. So this cultural gap is actually a two-way street, because not only the let's say the person in the position of power versus the person of the I don't want to call him the victim, but the recipient. They both have to understand that there is a cultural difference. So much so the in my case the Hispanic to the American.
Definitely. And that is where culture brokers come into the picture. Um, so a culture broker, when we look at a culture broker, we know that this work has been going on for 30 to 40 years now. But the culture broker is that bridge between the institutions and the communities. And it is not, and it's not a one directional thing. The culture broker is that 2-lane bridge where the community gets to express what their needs are, and if their willingness from the system is willing to listen to that. So the invitation in here is to co-create something new. Going back to the cereal example, there was some change that went one direction, but that change can go into the other direction to benefit the other group, or it can go, which would be the ideal, a middle point, and a compromise between both visions, the compromise in what others are thinking and what I am thinking, and really co-creating a new reality, a new sort of social norm that could help us and really feel like we are being sustained um, at an equal level.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So the cultural broker is going to help build bridges. So create an understanding, a sort of an educator where they can help explain, or understand in the first place, and then help explain. So the immediate surrounding also understands that there is a difference, and maybe how to change, whether it's the system or how to change the interaction, so everybody moves forward into a more common ground. Um, Tell me about this thought. I also happen to think that a cultural broker is not only the person that maybe understands both sides of the coin and can be that educator or that bridge, but a person that is in a leadership position. Maybe the guy that's making decisions for a group or an organization, whether they know it or not, they are also a cultural broker, a cultural leader, and can be key to make sure this gap gets closed as well.
Definitely. So when we think about cultural brokering, um, we need to think about a paradigm shift in which we are trying to professionalize what traditionally has been identified as soft skills. So if you have the soft skills, what we talked about is cultural competency, lived experience, being a trusted member in the community. When you have skills like that, you can have positive impact regardless of where you are, whether you're a frontline staff, a manager, or an executive. If you have those things in your in your experience, you can create different layers of impact within your institution. So obviously, when you're an executive and a manager, there's going to have more influence. But if there's willingness from the institution to uplift the leadership of frontline staff that are cultural brokers, or partnering with other institutions to bring those cultural brokers, you can really make a positive and genuine connection with the community to have those conversations and to find those middle ways or those middle points between how things are being done and perceived in the community, and how and the impact that you want to do with your institution within that community as well.
Mhm. Yeah. So that leader, that's great, because this could be anybody, right? This could be anybody that is the cultural broker, and it could be any culture individual that is the cultural broker. It doesn't have to be the guy that looks like me that understands those cultures just to be the bridge, but it could be, the executive director of an organization that is serving a community, that like I said, whether they know it or not, they're already cultural brokers. They just, should be aware that there is help out there, maybe, and that there is something they need to be, aware, or contact somebody to make sure that they are um, approaching a certain instance or making the right decisions to be inclusive, um, which is a lot of people's goals.
Yeah, when we take a step back and look at the notions of cultural brokers, different notions. When we see the international notion of what a cultural broker is, we see professionals who are more into fine arts, culture promotion, and really people that have certain set of skills. In the national perspective here in the U.S., you see who are more who have a more practical approach. So those cultural are more case managers, community liaisons, and so and so. Here in Boulder County is that both things have culture promotion and the more practical approach of resource navigation. And there is certainly that potential for a lot of people to be cultural brokers. What we call attention is to specifically that component of cultural competency and lived experience. Those who are trusted in the community will be able to engage in those conversations. So there is a certain core group of cultural brokers who are bilingual or multilingual and multicultural, and there are other groups of allies and other people that are doing very similar work that sustain the work of those cultural brokers in the community.
Right, excellent. Thank you for that. So cultural competency is, I think, a key here, and it's important to understand that, you know, cultural competency, at least in my mind, is it's important to say that you can know that you don't know, or you can say, I don't know that I don't know. And if we can get people more to the side of, I know that I don't know, it's already a step in the right direction, because at least you're aware that this exists. You're aware that has to be a special attention has to be put to it in everything we do, you know, whether it's creating a questionnaire or creating a test or, you know, a training or whatnot. There has to be that element of the, I know that I don't know, so you can help the inclusion process along. So with that, Guillermo, let me ask you this. So cultural brokers, what do they bring? Tell me a little bit more about that. What can they bring to the community, this cultural brokers?
So the cultural brokers can bring to the community at large, including the institutions and the businesses. They bring attention to those narratives, to those cultural differences. They are the ones that can move the dial to the I know that I don't know piece of this, of the spectrum, right? So a cultural broker, a very specific example is the cultural brokers from the Latinx nonprofits, including the Latino Chamber. We have El Paso Movement in Lafayette, El Comité of Longmont, even Intercambio and other organizations such as Amistad, where we see that they are going into the community. They are establishing relationships. They are educating folks of what's going on, because they help you build that bridge and that connection with the community. However, that is not a simple thing to do. Your institution needs to really be ready to back up that process once they decide to enable that relationship building. So having a cultural broker, before even approaching a cultural broker, you need to do a self-audit on what is it that it has allowed me to not even engage in these conversations until now. What is it that is driving me to have these conversations now? And then enable the cultural brokers within your institution, or bring cultural brokers and give them the leadership to help to build these bridges, to really convince the community that you are there for them and that you recognize that they have value. And all of that, the bridge to conveying your message and adjusting it to the needs of the community, it's going to be sustained by that bridge that the cultural broker will help you build. Because the idea is not for them to build it for you, but to really co-create it between your institution and the community, so you can have that relationship that could be sustainable in the long term.
Excellent. Wow. So with that, Guillermo, thank you for your time. This is great information. Remember, everybody, if you're listening to this video and you got to the end, you can contact us. Our information is going to be down here in the description of this video. If you would like to continue this conversation, or if you would like some more information, please call me, call Guillermo. We're passionate about this topic. We like to help, further inclusion and help you in your goals for any of that as well. So with that, before we go, Guillermo, I have one surprise question for you before you go. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, so what motivates you?
What motivates me? That's a hard one. I think what motivates me is just a passion of community and family. Those of us who are not in our places of origin find family in the extended family in the community. That and coffee as well. That's my first thing in the morning.
Very nice. I was wondering if coffee was going to come into the conversation.
Yes.
All right, buddy. Well, thank you so much, Guillermo, for this great topic, all the information you shared, and I hope it was helpful for everybody. Till next time.
Thank you, everyone.